part of the brain that is considered the hub to calculate, plan, allocate resources, take on a hard, challenging task. To be honest with you, I would never do this had it not been prescribed pushing oneself to do hard tasks that they really don't want to do. But in my case, since I'm not pregnant or I cannot be pregnant, I have no excuse. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So it's Ramadan and I'm fasting. So no food and no drink until sundown. To be honest with you, I would never do this had it not been prescribed by my maker to fast, and fasting being considered one of the higher forms of worship in Islam. So I'm not talking about fasting today and how it can help you lose some weight or get in shape or detoxify your body, or some people say it brings them mental clarity. Quite honestly, when my brain is lacking glucose and I'm fasting, it is anything but full of clarity. I'm talking about fasting today because it is a hard task that we have to consciously engage ourselves, to push ourselves, exert our willpower, our tenacity at full scale to accomplish a goal. Because these series of videos have been brain gain related, today's topic will be tenacity or willpower, which means pushing oneself to do hard tasks that they really don't want to do, or things that might be not quite enjoyable or fun to do, but by accomplishing the task, you enjoy unlimited benefits. In my video, I will highlight the part of the brain known as the hub of willpower. So I will highlight a bunch of studies and also some talks that you can further look into, indicating that willpower can be extended, can be expanded, can be built on to master tackling the hard tasks in life. My name is Amir Nabil. I am a nurse practitioner in psychiatry and the principal owner of Half Full Psychiatry, a clinic based out of Glastonbury, Connecticut, for treatment in medication management and psychotherapy for clients in ADHD, anxiety, depression, OCD, and PTSD. So these videos are efforts to leave my footprint behind after I leave this world so my children or anyone's soul can benefit from them. So the first thing I want to talk about is my experience as a Muslim and how it correlates to willpower. As a Muslim, I can say 100% or hundo P, as some say. Willpower is a needed 100% a needed reserve. So there are a number of worships in our faith as a Muslim that we train ourselves, we push ourselves to do that otherwise we won't do. And one of them will be fasting during the month of Ramadan. So we do not eat or drink or put an atom worth of liquid or solid while we are fasting. So no matter how thirsty or hungry we are, or no matter how tempting the food looks or smells, maybe walking by that bakery and smell the freshly baked donuts, or walking by a barbecue grill and smell that amazing beef steak being grilled. While tempting to eat that food or go after the drink, willpower and tenacity are such necessary attributes for us in these situations during fasting months. So again, we do not eat anything or drink anything or put anything in our mouth from dawn, which is typically an hour and a half before sunrise, till sunset. So these days for Ramadan, I wake up around 5:25 in the morning, which is extremely difficult for someone like myself who really enjoys his sleep and 8 hours of them. But waking up at 5:25 in the morning is not fun. Now, I must add, since I don't want to paint my faith, Islam, as a barbaric faith, as if we haven't gotten enough poor media coverage. In Islam, if a person is pregnant or has any kind of medical condition like diabetes or any medical condition for whom food is critically necessary for survival of life, then fasting in that situation for a Muslim is not obligated. But in my case, since I'm not pregnant or I cannot be pregnant, and neither, thank God, I have any medical condition, I have no excuse but to fast. The willpower or the tenacity or the ability to have or generate willpower through fasting, through our 5 daily prayers in Islam and other forms of worship has allowed me to take on other challenging tasks, which would have been as a student taking on different school assignments, my workout and exercise journey, or my consistent patience with others in times when it's easy to fall apart. Before we talk about how this willpower can benefit you, let's talk about some of the studies that have talked about willpower. Roy Baumeister and colleagues have done a number of studies and research. Essentially, their key takeaway has been that willpower is something that is limited unless it is replenished with glucose intake. In their studies, they had two groups of participants, and the group that were successful and were willing to take on and grapple with harder tasks consumed a form of glucose drink that allowed them to move on and take on the other harder tasks that they had ahead of them. Now, we know that glucose is a necessary element for our brain. Our brain is only 2% of the entire body, but yet it consumes 20% of the entire body's glucose reserves. Why? Because brain needs that energy to build more neurons or sustain the neurons, build more neurotransmitters like dopamine, norepinephrine, and many others. So yes, it does make sense that glucose is a necessary element for brain replenishment. However, somewhat contrary to Roy Baumeister, Carol Dweck from Stanford University and her colleagues took on the willpower to a next level with their studies. So essentially, the study looked into participants who, if they believed they had less willpower or they believed that their ability to solve harder tasks will be limited due to their limited ability to have access to glucose, then their willpower were certainly quite limited. On the other hand, the group who believed they had infinite reserve of willpower, they did not believe that they did not need any additional glucose drink to sustain their willpower or tenacity and to take on harder tasks. In other words, to summarize this, willpower could certainly be an infinite source for one if one has a clear belief system or have clarity on their goals and milestones. So for a Muslim like myself, that clear and ultimate goal to connect with God primes me to take on the challenging task of fasting. So before I can talk to you about how you can benefit from a brain gain standpoint through willpower, let's highlight the part of the brain known as the hub of willpower. Part of the brain that is considered the hub to calculate, plan, allocate resources to take on a hard, challenging task that one really doesn't want to do if they had a choice. That part of the brain is known as the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, or AMCC, which is located in the deep frontal part of the brain on both sides. So I'm going to read to you from the manuscript by Lisa Feldman Barrett out of Stanford University, who has done a lot of good work in the field of tenacity, growth mindset, AMCC specifically that we are talking about today, the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. The title of the manuscript is The Tenacious Brain, How the Anterior Mid-Cingulate Contributes to Achieving Goals. So in this manuscript, she summarizes the role of AMCC in a pretty nice way. Quote, "The anterior mid-cingulate cortex is an important network hub in the brain that performs the cost-benefit computations necessary for tenacity. Specifically, we propose that its position as a structural and functional hub allows the AMCC to integrate signals from diverse brain systems to predict energy requirements that are needed for attention allocation, encoding of new information, and physical movement, all in the service of goal attainment." So again, the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, AMCC, just simply doesn't increase your willpower, but it does the calculation, the planning, the allocation of resources throughout your brain and body to achieve a challenging task. And what is exciting is that AMCC is highly neuroplastic, which means, in other words, that you can modulate it, you can shape it to further enhance it. And simultaneously, a variety of research has shown that continuously taking on harder tasks and taking on newer challenges subsequently also enlarges your AMCC, which is a positive thing because it's broadening your willpower capacity. Now, I'd like to give full credit for this topic on willpower and tenacity to Dr. Andrew Huberman from Stanford University and his podcast, the Huberman Lab podcast. In his podcast, one of the studies that he refers to by Colcomb and colleagues labeled Aerobic Exercise Training Increases Brain Volume in Aging Humans. Essentially, the study talks about engaging in an aerobic exercise, which, by the way, it cannot be something that you enjoy doing, otherwise it will not be challenging, and for something that requires a mental push. So those sorts of aerobic exercise has shown to increase or enlarge the volume of the AMCC. So another very strong study done by Parvizi and colleagues titled The Will to Preserve Induced by Electrical Stimulation of the Human Cingulate Cortex. Another very strong study done by Josef, Parvizi, and colleagues titled The Will to Persevere Induced by Electrical Stimulation of the Human Cingulate Gyrus. So in this study, 2 patients with epilepsy were implanted with intracranial electrodes. So the researchers used the electrical brain stimulation and a combination of fMRI to understand different parts of the brain and brain activity. So again, in this study, when the researchers activated the AMCC part of the brain for those 2 patients, they felt primed to take on an imminent challenge with determination and tenacity. And one of the patients described the feeling as if he was driving towards a storm that was a couple of miles away, and he's headed towards the storm, and there is no choice to turn back around. So he said that he felt a little worried, but at the same time a sense of challenge and a sense of determination that he has to get through the storm and get to the other side. In other words, he wanted to push harder and get through this situation and not turn back around. So, to my fellow humans who are each day striving and struggling towards a cause, an added benefit to everything else that you're going through is that you're enlarging the AMCC and its capacity to take on more challenging tasks. So next time, before you say no to a challenging task that you don't want to take on, I say engage full throttle, which I pray for you and me will open doors to take on future obstacles.